Okay, I will go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. My name is Kene Chukwuanu, and we are here for how to be a successful EM applicant, outside influences, and other considerations. As a reminder, please keep your microphone on mute. These are our presenters today. We'll start with Dr. Morris.
All right. Thank you, Kene. So my name is Trey Morris. I'm the program director at the Texas Tech University Emergency Medicine Program in Lubbock, Texas. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you a little bit about a PD's perspective on some of these issues.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Michelle Lall. I am from Emory University in Atlanta, where I'm an associate residency director, as well as the director of the Medical Education Fellowship. And I'm also here on behalf of the SAEM Board of Directors.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kene Chukwuanu. I am from St. Louis, Missouri, and practice at the St. Louis University School of Medicine. Also the associate residency program there, director there, and director of the EM Ultrasound program. So this is today's agenda. We are going to be going over some special considerations that some people may have when looking to apply to emergency medicine, especially with this upcoming interview season. And we'll be going through LGBTQ issues, IMG and DO issues. We're talking about things pertaining to unrepresented in medicine applicants. We're talking about the couples match, alternative career paths, reapplicants, and switching to EM. There are a multitude of sources that are listed here on the right-hand side of your screen. Some from the Society of Academic Emergency Medicine Residents and Medical Students Group, their Foundations of Academic EM. CORD, the Advising Students Committee in Emergency Medicine, also has medical student resources and guides for different types of medical students. And of course, the Emory CORD guide on advising students that was released last year is a great resource. So with that, Dr. Morris.
All right, thank you. So applying as an LGBTQ applicant, one of the most fundamental questions you have to ask yourself is, am I going to be out? And as you probably know, coming out is it's more a process than it is a statement or a one-time event, a status or one-time event. And you have to decide if this is something that you're going to be comfortable doing over and over again throughout your residency. And are you in an environment where you think that that's something that's going to be appreciated and welcomed? One of the ways to help figure out whether or not this is going to be the right program for you and what message the program or institution is sending is looking at what sort of institutional commitment do they have to diversity, to LGBTQ inclusion. There's a website called Campus Pride, which actually looks at a lot of institutional factors and interviews college students across the nation and develops a Campus Pride Index. And that's something I think that you could certainly use. I think that also it's reasonable to ask, do you see yourself fitting in well with this program? And I think that a lot of times the answer to that question is going to be more of a gut feeling than it is going to be any kind of yes or no question that you can get from any kind of outside sources. When you're applying, particularly as an LGBT applicant, for many of you, your activities have been involved. That's a key portion of your identity, and your activities reflect that. And so you have to decide, do you need to be transparent in your activities, or do you want to try and conceal your activities? We'll see this sometimes in applicants, particularly, for instance, from BYU, who have gone on a mission and served their church for a couple of years and yet choose not to disclose that. Really, if there's going to be any kind of problem with being welcomed or accepted, it's something that you want to find out before you match there. I think that especially in this year when we're relying on a lot of things that we would ordinarily get in the interview day itself, I think that being as upfront as possible is going to be ideal for you. Addressing your LGBT status or identity in a personal statement is also something that can be fraught with difficulty. It's obviously something that's important to you, but it may or may not be relevant to your interest in emergency medicine. And I think that, again, without encouraging people to conceal something, you have to also acknowledge that as program directors, we're not looking necessarily for someone on the basis of their identity. We want to know, how are you going to bring your unique characteristics into my program and become an asset? And it may be that your LGBT identity is a large part of that, but it may not be. And so I don't think it's something that you absolutely must include in your personal statement unless it's otherwise relevant to what's interested you in emergency medicine. And finally, on the interview day itself, I would encourage you to be patient and gentle with your interviewers. As a program director, I know that we're responsible for all of the questions that are asked by our interviewers, but I also know that we have people that are just curious to find out more about you, and as such may touch on topics that are not completely permitted. And so if that does happen, if it's recurrent or if it's uncomfortable, please let the program director or program coordinator know, because it may be an education component that we can educate our interviewers a little bit better. But I would also take it as the opportunity to let them know more about who you are, to know about your spouse, your children, who you are outside of work that makes you unique. And so the intent of the question, I think, will carry a lot, should carry a lot of weight rather than just the words that they use. So I'm also going to speak briefly on applying as an IMG or a DO student who may not have had the opportunity to complete an emergency medicine rotation this cycle. Certainly, I think that that's going to be a relatively large number this year. When trying to choose which programs to apply to, I think one of the most valuable resources out there is the online, is the web pages of residency programs, where you can see the roster of residents. To be honest, some programs are not as receptive to IMGs or to osteopathic grads. And I think that's something that you want to know before you apply, so that you're not really wasting your time. The best source of that is to see what programs have done in the past and to use that to guide your selection of applications. The OSLO has been developed by the CORD SLO committee, and I think that this is something that if you are submitting when you're submitting your letters this year, it's absolutely imperative that you try to get as many of these as you can, at least 2, because program directors are, like most emergency physicians, have a relatively short attention span, and when they're looking through letters of recommendation, they want to go for information that tells them the answers they're looking for in the most focused and expedient fashion that they can. And the OSLO is designed to convey that information, even though it's coming from a non-EM based rotation. And so I think that your letters of recommendation will be much more strongly received and carry much more weight if they're in the OSLO format. I would also encourage you to take advantage of any kind of residency fairs or open houses so that you can see what the program's philosophy is, see are they welcoming of IMGs or osteopathic grads, and to see who is there, to see do they already have representation within those programs. Regional connections can be particularly important, and they're important in any year, but I think that they're even more important this year, given that the vast majority of applicants will have only one SLO. If you have a connection within a particular region, I think asking that connection about the receptiveness of programs, osteopathic or IMGs, is going to be very helpful, and I would consider asking them to perhaps put in a word or contact on your behalf, because most programs receive on the order of at least 100 applications per spot. And it's hard to stand out with those numbers. But if there's someone that's known to the program director that sends an email that says, you know, this person's really interested in your program, you know, could you consider taking a look at them? That will carry a lot of weight. And finally, I think that letters of intent or emails this year are going to be much more numerous than in previous years, and they can carry a lot of weight, but only when they're personal. If you truly have a reason for wanting to go to a program, if you have a connection to that city, that region, then letting the program director know that, I think, is very reasonable. What I would try to avoid doing is sending just a generic letter of intent that doesn't show much connection to the program or the region, because those usually will not carry very much weight.
All right, thank you. And we will be having a question and answer session afterwards. Please type your questions in chat. So if you have any questions for Dr. Morris or for any of the panelists and participants, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the question and answer session following this. All right, so I'm going to be talking about underrepresented in medicine applicants. And it can be a challenge for those who are a part of this group. It can be a challenge to overcome the stigma. It can be a challenge to overcome the microaggression that you may face. But I want to give you hope and encouragement that you're almost the final chapter of your education. And so do not lose hope and keep on going. It's essential that you find a mentor, or if you can't find a mentor, an advisor that can advise you through this process. Hopefully it's also a person that's underrepresented in medicine, underrepresented in emergency medicine, that can guide you through this process. There are different avenues for this. SAEM's Academy for Diversity and Inclusion in Emergency Medicine has a mentorship program, as does a coalition of different groups, EMRA and ACEP namely, that have started a mentoring group that they started last month. Those are on their websites, and you can join those to get some more mentorship and advising in this process. So when you're going to apply for emergency medicine as part of this group, you have to know that discrimination should not occur, but there may be some discriminatory practices that may exist. You can't change those discriminatory practices from other people. All you can do is be yourself and present yourself in the best possible light. Most of your application is not going to be any different from any other type of applicant at any other different school, but you want to highlight the things that make you who you are, be yourself. Don't try to hide your status. Don't try to hide who you are. There are programs that are out there that are looking specifically for you and trying to ramp up their diversity efforts. So how do you amplify and advocate for your own candidacy? You can do this through the different organizations that you belong to, the different activities and community service that you've done throughout your medical school and undergraduate career, and highlighting those things in your ERAS application, in the actual CV portion of ERAS, maybe even tying that into your personal statement. So be yourself. Programs are looking for you, and highlight yourself. There are programs that are looking for diversity, so you should be looking for diverse programs as well. The way to do this is construct your list, look at all the different programs in emergency medicine, talk to different people that may have matched in emergency medicine prior to you, and say, hey, does this program value diversity? Do they have a diverse group of residents? Do they have a diverse group of faculty? Is this a program in an area that is more diverse, that would be somewhere that I would be happy practicing in for the next 3 to 4 years? It's essential that you find a good fit, and in doing this, you may not want to put yourself in a position where your diversity isn't valued or who you are isn't valued, but maybe it's looking to a program that has previous applicants and previous graduates that look more like you, that come from places like you, so that you'll be more comfortable and you can focus just on learning and practicing emergency medicine while you're there. So a good source of this is some programs have diversity outreach programs. Now I know that a lot of these were centered around away rotations, and while you may not be able to do an away rotation, they still have these programs, they still have these outreach programs, and they're still looking for applicants that fit these criteria. Of course, reaching out to residents, chief residents, senior residents at that program, reaching out to different faculty members that you may see by looking at the web pages, as Dr. Morris stated before. That's a great source of information, especially if they have pictures. It's a great source of seeing how diverse that program really is. You're going to need a support system. You're going to need mentoring. Sometimes it's in a diverse program, and sometimes it's in a program that may not be diverse, but is looking to upcharge their diversity efforts. So, like I said, looking through the program website, contacting different people that you may know from your medical school that matched in previous classes, asking your own deans, what would be a good program for someone like me? I'm trying to go to this diverse area, give them specific criteria that you're trying to fill in terms of where you're headed for your residency program. Even though there may not be a lot of underrepresented minorities or underrepresented in medicine at that program, that does not mean that they're not welcoming. That does not mean that they're not searching. That does not mean that you can't be the one to go there and help kickstart their diversity efforts. And we're certainly looking for people that are self-motivated, that are willing to help us diversify emergency medicine even more than it already is. A family and friend support system is always great, especially in the instance of maybe not being or being able to practice in an area where there's a lot of diversity. If you're close to your family, or at least gets back to your family and friends, that can provide your own support network at that location. Also, if a program doesn't have a lot of diversity in their residents or their faculty, they may have other programs at that institution that have more diversity. They may have groups like the National Medical Association or National Hispanic Medical Association who are located in the area and practice in the area that you may be able to reach out to as well. So keep that in mind. The next thing that I'm going to discuss is the couples match. And this can be a tricky situation for people that are trying to match themselves and their partner in a different specialty. And so the first things you have to know is that you're not obligated to disclose. You don't have to say that you're going to do a couples match. You can match separately and just try to pair your rank list. So you're not obligated to disclose if you think that's going to harm you in terms of your application. Most of the times it does not harm you in terms of your application, and program directors like to know that stuff up front, especially if they can in some way influence another program that may be at that location into interviewing an applicant because you interviewed there, or because your spouse interviewed at a program at that location. That can sometimes get you an interview at that place, and that place that they may have not even necessarily considered before. So being open with program coordinators and program coordinators is definitely essential. You have to know you and your significant other's competitiveness. So if this person that you're with is in a highly competitive specialty and has great board scores, then you may have to look at your own competitiveness and see, do I match up to that person? Am I going to be a hindrance? Do I need to apply to more programs? What is my application strategy going to be for my significant other? If my significant other is someone who's applying to highly competitive programs and maybe does not have as good of grades or a competitive application, you have to develop a strategy for that, and you may have to apply to more programs than you would individually. Some things that you want to take into consideration is, do you want to be in the same program? Do you want to be in the same location, such as geographic location, the same city? Do you want to be in a community hospital, a county hospital, an academic hospital institution? Do you have any compromises that you're willing to make in terms of your application or doing residency in a certain place? And you have to discuss this upfront with your significant other so that you know going into this match what it is we need to present as a couple in order to best enhance our ability to match in the same location. So know your competitiveness, know your significant other's competitiveness. It's very essential. And you're gonna have to expand your application. So the number of applications you may apply to as an average candidate for emergency medicine may need to expand if you're trying to match with another person. And you can probably increase that by, if you're an average applicant, probably increase that by almost double. So you may have to apply to upwards of 60 locations so that you're getting enough interviews where both of you have interviewed in order to have a successful match in the long run. If you're going through this application cycle and you get into December, you get into January, and you're not really linking up with your significant other, that's something to discuss. Talking to the programs where either of you have interviewed, something to discuss sooner rather than later, especially contacting those program coordinators, contacting those program directors. A good strategy is looking at the geographic locations that have multiple programs. So we know that some of the big cities, the Bostons, the Chicagos, LA, those have, New York, have multiple programs in that geographic location so that you could both live together, stay together, but maybe practice at different hospitals if that's needed, or practice at the same hospital, or somebody at a community program, somebody at an academic program. But grouping it between locations will get you the biggest bang for your buck. So it may be harder to go to a more rural place or a more isolated place if there's only a single program there for both of you to interview, as opposed to going to a program or a location that has multiple different training institutions at that environment. So bigger cities would be something to look into. And after that, what you want to do is identify programs with the same specialties, of course, but identify programs in the same location that are close to each other would be second. Thirdly, programs that are in the same region. So maybe we have to live 40 miles outside of the hospital because one of our programs is here and one of our programs is there, but we could still stay here and drive each day to our different programs and come back and live together. So those are things that you need to talk with upfront with your significant other. In terms of rank list, after interview season, after you've all kind of made a list, take notes as you go, how receptive people are to the possibility of you couples matching, and then prepare a separate rank list. You and your significant other prepare a separate rank list, and then come together and combine those rank lists. And what you're looking to do is combine the rank list, of course, in places that you're going to be geographically located in the same area, maybe even the same program and same training institution, but also congealing those two rank lists so that you both be happy. You don't want to accept a location that you'll be unhappy with, or that your significant other will be unhappy with, because that's going to affect your own happiness while you're in residency training, of course. And then after the interview season is over with, after you've got your rank list together, or maybe as you're putting in your rank list, contact programs that you've interviewed at, especially both ones that you both interviewed at. This is essential for programs and specialties that are early match. So if your spouse or significant other is going into an early match specialty and they match in a place, you want to be the day after they match, the day of their matching, say, hey, my spouse just matched here. I've interviewed here, or I haven't got an interview here. I would like to interview here. Contact that program director, contact that program coordinator, those APDs, and explain to them your situation. You have to be your own advocate. And I guess in conclusion, you want to be happy. So you want your spouse to be happy. You want to be happy yourself. Your happiness and your spouse's happiness are related. And if you're not happy and you're not at a location that you want to be at, then it's going to affect your training. It's going to affect your education. All right. Dr. Lall is up next.
All right. So I'm going to touch briefly on those of you that have had an alternate career kind of before medical school. So really, you have to kind of think about how you're going to sell this. Certainly the average age of people entering medical school is older than it was 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago. So what have you done in life? And these things are really important. This is what sets you apart from many of your peers that are applying. And this is certainly where you obtain skills that are going to make you a better physician. So you need to really be thoughtful about those experiences and think about how you translate those. So what was your profession? And, certainly this is not something you have to share, but I think in almost any situation, we all see it as a very positive set of life skills that you learned in your other job that will make you a better EM physician. And no job is too small. So certainly if you worked as a server in a restaurant for years to save money, let me tell you, the servers that we've had come through the residency program are phenomenal. Amazing people skills, absolutely able to multitask, and usually great memories. So these are things that are really important to tell us and to sell as a positive, and really trying to think about how you use that skill set that you learned to make it translatable and relatable to emergency medicine. So I think you really want to use this to your advantage. And this is a place where you can really brag on yourself. Like, I want to hear, maybe you were a software engineer. Well, I'm not very good with technology. So maybe you need to really tell me what those skills mean. How does knowing how to program help you be a better emergency physician? What connections and mental pathways did you create with that work that are going to make you a better doctor? So really make sure you've taken the time to really consider how you would highlight these points. Next slide, please. Kene. Thanks. So reapplicants to emergency medicine. So, emergency medicine is one of the more competitive subspecialties. So you really need to make sure that you have good insight into what prevented you from matching the first time. And a lot of times this needs to come from a clerkship director, a program director, an APD, somebody who can have a really frank and honest conversation with you about where the weaknesses were. So sometimes, we'll get the occasional person who's like, well, I didn't do my emergency medicine rotation until November, and I totally changed my mind and I fell in love, but to switch all my applications, I was too late to get interviews. So I didn't match. Sometimes we hear from people who, maybe participated in the couples match and they didn't use a lot of the strategies that were spoken of earlier, and they end up not able to match. So you really need to have some good insight, and this can be hard, right? It's devastating not to match. And you really have to be willing to really take a step forward within yourself and to really be mature to say, okay, where were my issues? And wherever I had the issues, are they something that I have changed since the last application cycle? Perhaps if the issue is a red flag board score, well, you can't really change that. So, you need to kind of work with an advisor or a mentor and be diligent about figuring out how you can maybe offset whatever the primary driver of not matching was. And then, do you have a cell for what you've done in your time off since the last match? So, I have definitely seen people come through who are trying to match into emergency medicine for the second time. They chose not to do the SOAP or to take a preliminary medicine or surgery year. They chose not to do a TY year. They're not doing research, and they're kind of doing nothing. Probably not the best path. So you really need to look at this as a time where you have grown and you have gained new experiences that are strengthening your application. And again, you have to advocate for yourself. You're going to hear this a few times. This is where you come in, you sit down with me on my office Zoom, and you say to me, well, you know what, Dr. Lall, it was really disappointing, but let me tell you what I've done. And you lay it out for me. You tell me that, yes, you did a visiting rotation that was in the spring somewhere because you changed your mind or you knew you hadn't matched. And instead of taking April off like all your friends, you did something, you worked hard, and you have improved yourself. So, just really think about that and make sure you have a cell. And again, this is something where mentorship comes in handy. You're not the only person who hasn't matched into the specialty of your choice. Happens every year to people. But you really want to think about with intention what you've been doing, what you are doing, and what you plan to do, kind of for the remainder of the application season. Because many of us will ask, oh, you're involved in this great project. Are you seeing that through to the end of the academic year? Versus, well, no, I'm just doing it, for right now. And then I'm going to, unplug starting in February. So just be thoughtful about that. And next slide, please. So switching to EM. So I think, this is also not uncommon anymore. And a lot of times I do think this happens to applicants who have their emergency medicine month basically after they've gone through the interview process. Still a lot of traditional medical schools do not offer the emergency medicine clerkship until your fourth year. And if the whole way through school, you were like, I'm doing urology, I'm doing urology, I'm doing urology. You do your urology month, you like it, you're like, okay, I'm good. And then all of a sudden, January, February, you do emergency medicine, and you're like, wait a minute. But now you've kind of gone too far. You know, and there's different strategies there, but I think many residents or many medical students will choose to do the first year in whatever they matched in, which I think is very reasonable. In every subspecialty of medicine, we touch it somehow, somewhere in emergency medicine. So you are going to be learning great skills, tons of medical knowledge, and going through that pretty steep learning curve that is your intern year. So this is a super, super important time to really think about why you're switching and to really be thoughtful about your answers. So, you know, what is it that you love about emergency medicine? Is it the acuity? Is it the diversity in pathology and patients that we're able to treat and see? You know, in full disclosure, for me, a major turnoff is somebody saying, well, the lifestyle is better. Well, there are some really big pluses and minuses to the lifestyle in emergency medicine. And to me, that's not a very well thought out answer. And again, you really want to focus on how has your experience in whatever discipline you're in now made you a stronger applicant. I think the other thing you want to do is hopefully by now you've already have a mentor within emergency medicine who is helping you work through some of these things. And I know at least at my institution, we have residents from medicine, surgery, transitional year that rotate with us as rotators. So that is a huge way to give yourself a leg up if you're able to serve as one of the rotating interns in the emergency department, get your name out there, get known by that program, and get another great letter of recommendation.
Thank you. At this time, I just want to give a quick plug for the future sessions that we'll be having. And the next session is on the 21st of September. So next Monday at 6 p.m. Central, going through clinical scenarios. Of course, there's been a series of different topics that have gone on. And this is I think this is the fourth session that we're doing for SAAM. And you can find all the recorded sessions at this address here, and look forward to some of these future sessions. At this time, I want to open up the chat for any questions. I know some of the questions have been answered in the chat. See if we can go back and see if we answered everything. But please type your questions in the chat. Also, if there's anything that any of the presenters want to touch on from other presenters' talks, you can feel free to do that as well too.
Yeah, I think I'd just like to highlight something Dr. Morris said earlier. You know, this is a year more than ever to really research programs. You know, I think in years past, students have been able to kind of get away with showing up, maybe looking at the website a little bit the night before, and maybe they've applied to the program simply because of location or name, or they have a friend that's there, whatever it might be. But, you know, this year with the loss of just the in-person events for interviews, you really need to dig at some of these institutions. You should be scouring absolutely everything on the websites. You should go beyond the department website too, and I think really see what the university does and what the university values. Because even though as departments we're all relatively independent, a lot of those politics and things that are held of value to the university trickle all the way down. So really take the time to do your homework. Look at all the class photo montages that are up there. Do you see people that look like you? You know, those are important questions to ask. And I think, you know, as we heard earlier, please don't hide any part of yourself. Be you. You know, a lot of us are looking for people who really want to contribute and to bring something new or different to a program. And I think too, don't be afraid to be the trailblazer somewhere. If you feel like you're getting a lot of support, the residents who are there feel like they've been supported through other things that might be considered a hardship or an issue, even if they're not the same as yours, I think you can get a good idea from the residents how well they feel supported by the program leadership. And that's important.
I concur with that. I'd also like to add, don't be afraid of programs that are new or programs that are not in areas that maybe you considered. All of the training programs, all the 240 plus training programs that our ACGME review committee has stated are accredited, they're all going to lead you to the same point of getting board certification. What you're trying to do is you're trying to find what the best fit for you would be. And so don't be mesmerized just because there may be a program that has a big name. They've certainly earned that big name, but it may not be the best fit for you. There may be a better fit for you in a smaller program, a newer program, a program that's not in a location that maybe you highly prioritized before. And all you can do is look into their website, use the internet, use your resources at your medical school, people who have previously matched, and look about, is this going to be a good fit for me? What do they have there that they offer that may be something that is intriguing to me? And like Dr. Lall said, you're going to lose a lot of those sensations that you had by being able to be on the ground and touch a program. And anybody who has lost some type of sense knows that they have to make their other senses a lot stronger by doing a little bit more research, a little bit more work, and building up their other senses to be able to detect what's going on. So please do the work beforehand. They pushed back the interview season and the application season. We can't see your information until October 21st. So you have a lot of time between now and then to go and research all of the 240 plus programs in emergency medicine.
I definitely agree. Residency is stressful enough. You might as well be happy with being who you are. If you get the sense that you're not going to be welcomed or appreciated there's plenty of other good programs that will take you where you can be yourself and be happy.
So a question in the chat, would it be acceptable to complete one audition rotation per this year's guidelines, but also complete an ultrasound rotation at a different program?
I think if your institution allows it, then yes, that's something that would be acceptable to do a subspecialty rotation. And even if it's 2 weeks long, you can get the EM, there's a subspecialty slow available as well, which I think you should be able to get from that rotation.
Yeah, and I concur with the subspecialty slow. Anything that's emergency medicine related, such as a subspecialty like ultrasound, EMS, critical care, if there's EM critical care people there, toxicology, those things will be things that you get a subspecialty slow from. Anything that's outside of emergency medicine, the O, you can think about the O for other or the O for outside. So if it's your IM rotation or something like that, that would be what the O slow is for. In terms of doing your audition rotation at your home institution and maybe going somewhere else for an ultrasound rotation, if you're interested in ultrasound and that's what you're clinically interested in, and you want to learn more about that, don't deprive yourself of your medical school tuition and your education. And yes, will this be an opportunity to get a letter from a different program? Yes, it will. Is it cheating the game? No, because you are trying to acquire different experiences in your medical school education as a fourth year, self-design, to be able to enhance your abilities as a future physician. So don't feel bad in that way. And as long as you're kind of relegated to the guidelines that have been set. Would a slow be more valuable than a letter from a specific emergency physician? And so I think that the most valuable letter, of course, is a group department slow. And then getting slow from somebody at the program would be okay. Somebody else wanted to.
Yeah, I think that there's sort of a hierarchy of slows, and like you mentioned, the group slow that includes clerkship director and program director is probably going to carry the most weight. A slow from a EM rotation is going to be next, and then you get into the lower or smaller sample sizes. So your subspecialty rotation, there's actually a slow for a non-EM, non-academic EM faculty. The thing that we're going to want to know is how do you compare to other students? And if their experience is, I had a student rotate with me back in 1984, and you're definitely a lot better than they were, that's not going to carry as much weight. And so having an ultrasound rotation where they probably have plenty of students coming through will allow a more robust comparison. And I think that that SLO would probably carry more weight than a non-academic EM physician letter. There's a lot of wiggle room there depending on the specifics, but I would think in general a subspecialty SLO would carry more weight than a single physician's SLO outside of an academic institution.
I would agree. I think the only time where that might be kind of close is if there's somebody you've been doing research with, or you've been really involved in some type of project and they know you very well, maybe not from the clinical side, but work ethic, responsibility, project leadership. A letter from somebody like that can be very strong as well. But otherwise, if it's just Dr. Smith that you had a great time with on a couple shifts because you guys got along really well, you know, but Dr. Smith doesn't work with a lot of students, probably not the strongest letter.
And in general, for your OSLOs, they're going to carry more weight if they come from specialties that are a little bit more similar to EM. So an OSLO from a psychiatrist will not carry tremendous weight typically, but from a critical care or surgery, especially something like that, I think would actually be a lot more comparable to what we're looking for in EM.
Now, with that being said, some students' rotations were cut short with COVID, and they weren't able to rotate for several months or get a actual clinical experience in maybe IM or PEDS or surgery, which most people consider the foundational places to get letters and foundational experiences for emergency medicine. What would you guys suggest for those students if they're looking for letters from those rotations?
I would suggest getting a letter from the person that you did have the most opportunity to work with and making sure that you address that in your personal statement.
I would agree. And I think it's okay too to ask the letter writer to say, Dr. Smith, I know I worked with you on internal medicine, but I know we talked a lot about, you know, how workups from the ED could have differed, or, you know, broadening the differential, or things that went well or didn't go well, you know, from the second the patient walked in the door. Perhaps you'd be willing to, you know, elaborate on how you thought my skills were specifically related to emergency medicine. I think we all realize that this is a very challenging year for everybody, and that many people's opportunities were not what were expected. So, you know, I think we're all going into this with a really, you know, positive attitude and trying to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, you know, and at the end of the day, you only have one emergency medicine letter. That's okay this year. It's okay. It's what it is, you know, and if you worked with an internist on medicine who can give you a glowing letter of recommendation, then that's a great letter.
All right. Does anybody have any more questions before we wrap up?
Thank you all for taking the time to join us.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and especially thank you to the presenters for spending some time with us this evening after their busy shifts. And if you have any questions, of course, we have some Twitter handles there, and I'm sure you can find us all our email addresses at our program pages there. And thank you for joining us, and hopefully you join us again for next week's session on clinical scenarios. And that's it. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.